Hey everybody, it's Mr. XStitch. I'm here today to share with you the origin story of XStitch Magazine and why I decided to make it. It all began in 2006 when I went on holiday to Canada. I think I was a smoker at the time and I was worried about the length of time it would take to get across to Canada on a plane, and I needed something to pass the time. And I went into a haberdashery shop and I saw a cross-stitch kit on the wall and I thought, that would be a funny thing to buy. Imagine what people will think if they see a man of my size on a plane doing cross-stitch. That'll freak people out. Now, in a post 9/11 world, I never really thought about what it was like to freak people out on a plane. I just bought that pattern, and when I got to Canada and I actually had a go at cross-stitching, I kind of fell in love with it almost straight away. As any of you who've tried cross-stitch know, it's super mindful. There's a repetition to the stitch. It's really simple and easy to do, and you end up with something that is a timeless memento that you can either keep or share with a loved one. So it had a lot going for it. The first kit I did was an Art Nouveau head by Alphonse Mucha. Took me about 2 years to complete it, got a few of the colours wrong, and when I finished it I gave it to my mum because that's what all good boys do. After that I started looking around to find out what other designs I could do that sort of interested me. It was tricky. The next design I bought was of a geisha girl that I found, and then after that I managed to find a website that did art prints, and so I started doing the Kiss by Klimt. 70,000 stitches. I never actually finished that design. It just got too out of hand. I started to really struggle to easily find patterns that I wanted to do. There I was, a man in his 30s, just looking for designs that represented my interests. And while there were a few people who were maybe doing race cars or sort of chivalry designs, a lot of the time if I wanted to find something that had a masculine edge, for instance, I would end up having to look down the territory of like wolves or dragons and stuff that just really I wasn't that interested in. I was always interested in street art and more urban art expressions, and it was really difficult to find those. Then, thankfully, I discovered PC Stitch and found that I could make my own patterns. I made a few patterns based on the designs of other graffiti artists because I'm not a graffiti artist. So in 2008 I launched an Etsy store called Mr. XStitch and started a blog that went along with that. After a while of doing the blog and writing about such interesting topics as why I like cucumber sandwiches, or the most efficient way to put your socks on errors so that they dry and you can remove them with efficiency, I decided to start featuring the work of other people and showcasing the modern needlework that I knew was out there but I hadn't really seen in the mainstream. Over time and over the years, the website started to gain a bit of traction, and because I was a man standing up for the cause of contemporary embroidery and needlecraft, particularly on a small island like the UK, I was able to get involved in things and do some exhibitions at shows. And then in 2011 I appeared on a national television programme where I competed in a needlework competition and failed very badly. But it was all starting to move me towards this path of becoming someone who was able to work within the needlework sphere for a living. Now, fairly early on I realised that it wasn't really about me as a cross-stitch designer, and it wasn't really about me as someone who made things. My position kind of evolved slightly to being someone who was showcasing other people's work. What I was able to do as a man with tattoos who just said, look, I like doing needlework, it's good for you, why don't you try it? So I was able to sort of dismantle people's preconceptions of what needlework and cross-stitch was all about. And once that was done, I was able to then have a dialogue with them about how amazingly diverse and how beautiful embroidery and needlecraft can be. I carried on with a day job, working all the while what's called bootstrapping the website, running the website along the side. I ended up selling a few patterns on Etsy, but not that many. I did a podcast for a while, had numerous posts on the Mr. XStitch website. I curated a book called Push Stitchery, which was a contemporary embroidery and needlecraft book, gallery book featuring 30 artists from around the world. I started doing more exhibitions at shows and curating things and showing people what a diverse world needlework was. We had tapestries that had drugs and guns on them. We had tiny embroidery on teacups. We had bathtubs that had embroidery drilled into them. It was really an exciting opportunity to be able to show people this stuff that I'd seen online. And while social media was beginning to gain momentum, it was still quite a novelty, and it still is to this day. You know, there are a lot of people who still think that embroidery and needlecraft is quite old and fusty and not something that is young and fresh and modern, and yet it really is. I mean, now, thankfully, the amount of social media throughput that there is, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Pinterest, you name it, it's really easy for us to gain this kind of inspiration. But certainly back when I started, it wasn't. You couldn't see the work as easily. And so, you know, I was able to take advantage of my perspective and then share it in different places with different people. Then I ended up managing to get a column in one of the UK's most popular cross-stitch magazines, writing every month about the things that kind of caught my eye and trying to share my slightly irreverent perspective, all with the idea of gaining a bit of foothold in what was seen as quite a traditional medium, and trying to just, you know, always counter argue that point, always show that it doesn't really matter what kind of person you are, that cross stitch is something you can do, and cross stitch is something that you will take great pleasure in. All the while I was writing for these magazines and understanding the processes by which they produced the content, you know, these magazines that were available in the mainstream shops, I started to see, or I would often have conversations with them and wonder why they weren't doing content that was fresher or content that was particularly different. Not necessarily rude stuff or, you know, controversial stuff, but just stuff that wasn't familiar. Just stuff that wasn't the same as had been seen before, because I was noticing that regardless of who was editing the magazine, the speed of production meant that they couldn't take a lot of time to explore new ideas, and the fact that the magazines also sold advertising space made them a little bit risk averse, so their main priority was to maintain the status quo. I often wondered what we could do differently about that, and ideas began to form in my mind, but I was powerless to do anything about it because I was just a guy that wrote a column in a magazine. I didn't produce a magazine. Now, ironically, one of my previous incarnations, I'd been a town councillor in a small town, and as part of that I'd produced the town council newsletter. So I'd learned how to do magazine design. Nothing spectacular, but I'd got the skill set and it was something I genuinely was interested in. And then in 2016, two separate things happened that kind of brought these ideas together. I bought an independent magazine about Lego. It was one that was produced that just showcased how Lego is being produced by adult fans of Lego in creative ways, and it was really enlightening. It was great to see not only the artwork being produced by these Lego creators and just how mind-blowing it could be, but also the fact that somebody had produced a magazine on a niche topic, something that was of interest to them. And it kind of got me thinking that maybe the same thing could happen with cross stitch. Then at a needlework show at the Birmingham NEC, I spent the afternoon with Maria Diaz, a fantastic cross stitch designer who I interview here, and she convinced me that it was worth taking a chance. I'd got this idea in my head that perhaps I could produce a cross stitch magazine that reflected the diversity of design that I was seeing from different people in different countries with different styles. She made me feel excited about the prospect of doing it, so I started looking into it more to understand what it would take to produce a magazine. Then in 2017, I got a book that was one of these planner diary things, and it had write your big juicy goals at the start of the year, and I wrote down to become Mr. XStitch full time. It had been an aspiration of mine for a long time, and the Mr. XStitch website didn't necessarily make a lot of money, but it certainly had a lot of audience. There were a lot of people who liked what I was doing, and I knew that the newsletter that I sent out via email was, you know, well received by the people who liked contemporary embroidered art. So I wrote down to become Mr. XStitch full time and didn't really give it a lot more thought. And then about 3 weeks later, I got a notice of redundancy from my day job. What was I to do? What I decided to do was take the plunge. I launched a Kickstarter campaign to start a new cross-stitch magazine, the kind of magazine that I wanted, the kind of magazine I'd wanted in 2008, and the kind of magazine that I knew I could produce. The campaign was a huge success. I think I hit my goal within about 4 days and went on to exceed my goal by about 200%. And suddenly it became a reality. Suddenly I'd been given this opportunity to turn my ideas into reality and to make a XStitch magazine for people who were forward thinking. A XStitch magazine for people who maybe wanted something different from the mainstream. Now don't get me wrong, the current crop of mainstream XStitch magazines do a fantastic job of every month providing great content for people. A lot of people want nice things to stitch to share, and I completely back that idea up. But also I recognise that those magazines don't necessarily provide the kind of patterns that everybody wants to put on their walls. And by creating my own magazine, it gave me the opportunity to do that. So some of the core ideas that I'd had rolling around in my head I was able to implement, and the first one was the idea of having themed issues. In every XStitch magazine that I'd seen before, I'd seen the commissioning editors producing designs and then asking designers to make them for themselves, and to me that just seemed like a lot of hard work. So I decided to turn that idea on its head, and all I did was I came out with the theme of revolution, and then I contacted as many XStitch designers as I could think of, and I invited them to respond to that theme, channeling their own creative juices into that theme to produce content for people to enjoy. From there I also sought to get thoughtful articles, things that would not insult your intelligence, things that related to cross-stitch and textile art that would be of interest to the reader. So as well as having a magazine that had nice designs to stitch, there was also something interesting to read. Then I was really fortunate that my good friend Stacey Grant, who'd done the photography on the Mr. XStitch Guide to Cross Stitch, buy your copy here, was able to come with me and be my art director on the magazine. So we were able to take an interesting design approach and combine it with themed issues from a diverse collection of designers, thoughtful content, and package it all together. And that was how the magazine started, and that was why the magazine started. I just wanted to create a magazine that showcased the diversity. I've said it about 9 times in this video, but you know, the world of cross stitch is filled with different designers from different countries with different aesthetics. It can be cute, but it can be edgy, it can be dark, it can be funny, it can be beautiful. And with each issue of the magazine, I try and curate a collection of designs that will give anybody something to try. You might not like all of the designs in there, but hopefully there's something you like. And the way that we present the magazine and what we're doing with the design means that it's a magazine that hopefully you will want to share with people, that you will want to show to people who've never tried cross stitch before, so that maybe they can try it for themselves and fall in love with it the way that I did in 2006. It's been a long journey for me to get to the point of producing XStitch Magazine, but now as we enter the 4th year of production, I couldn't be prouder with the way the magazine's turned out. Since we started, we've featured over 150 designs from over 50 different designers from at least 12 different countries. And it's been amazing to be able to showcase all of this talent. We bring new people in, we have people who've been around stitching for decades who've contributed to the magazine and who love the opportunity to do things different. We've brought people in who've never produced content from magazines before and given them the opportunity to shine. And I just love finding new talent online and being able to bring it into a wider audience and share their patterns with you. So that's why I started XStitch Magazine. I created a magazine that I would have wanted when I started stitching. I created a magazine that you can enjoy stitching, and if this issue isn't the one that appeals to you, then the next issue will, because each theme is different to the next. Hopefully you'll find that there are issues that you really respond to, whether it's Namaste or Noir, whether it's Love or the Munchies, whether it's Space or whether it's Beats. We've got something for everyone, and I will continue to produce magazines with themes that will hopefully encourage you to get itching for some stitching. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. It's a bit of a ramble, but I just wanted to explain why I made the magazine, you know. The mainstream cross-stitch market is still somewhat catering to the centre and still playing it safe, and yet online we see remarkable designs from amazingly talented people who are choosing cross-stitch as their medium. And really XStitch is the only magazine that has the ability to showcase those with you, so I will continue to do that as long as I can. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Thanks for purchasing XStitch Magazine. If you haven't already tried it, please do go and have a look for yourself. Subscribe, you get instant access to 4 back issues, and it's an amazing bargain for a digital magazine that you will enjoy. Thank you so much. Feel free to like the video if you do, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel because there's more needlework content heading your way. I love you guys. Happy stitching.